Hey, this is part 2 of the My Hero Academia Season 1 video, so if you haven't seen the first one, you should probably go do that since we pick up right where we left off. You can find a link to it below. I'm hoping I didn't have to fight the YouTube copyright system too hard this time around, but if that is the case, you'll be able to watch the completely unedited version of this over on Patreon. They always get to see videos early and untouched by the copyright system. So if you'd like to show your support like these lovely people and have your name show up in the credit scroll, you can find a link below. Also, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It costs you nothing up front, and you can change your mind down the road if you'd like. In the growing pool of AI-generated scripts and voiceovers, small channels like mine could use all the help we can get, so you should like and subscribe. Second, I already touched on it earlier this month, but our channel artist Uka unexpectedly lost her stepfather in early June. With it being so sudden, the horrific nature of it, and the burden it's placed on her and her mother, they've started a GoFundMe to try to offset the many unanticipated issues that came along with this loss. Uka works incredibly hard on the art for this channel for projects you guys haven't even seen yet, and I want to return as much of that kindness as possible. I've already donated, and I hope some of you can too. You can find a link to that below as well. With all that being said, let's pick up right where we left off. Thanks to All Might's breathtaking displays of heroism and the sheer spectacle of the power he commands, he received unwavering popularity from not just the general public but other heroes too. His mere presence became a deterrence to those with ill intent, causing the once high crime rate to fall year after year. This achievement earned him the title of the Symbol of Peace. His accolades and accomplishments make his recognition of Deku's potential as a hero hold more weight. But most importantly, that recognition was coming from the person Deku admired the most. Deku still doesn't realize the magnitude of the words being said to him until All Might verbally deems him worthy of inheriting his power. Interestingly, no one in the hero world truly knows what All Might's quirk is, and he admits that he constantly dodges the question during interviews through the use of humor. It would be very easy for All Might to simply give his quirk a generic name like superpower, one that everyone would accept and drop the subject, but he doesn't, presumably because of the high regard he has for the quirk and its previous users. Another reason for his question dodging is because All Might feels it's important for the Symbol of Peace to be perceived as a natural-born hero. There's merit to wanting people born with quirks to believe they can grow up to be just as heroic and just as powerful as All Might, however rare that chance may be. That belief keeps the cycle going of inspiring others into following in his footsteps. If it's discovered that All Might's quirk was inherited artificially and not genetically, especially considering the nature of the quirk itself, it would be just as easy for people to see that and think, well, I'll never be that strong, so why bother chasing that dream? That ignorance to how All Might's quirk operates is what allows rising heroes to blindly chase the bar All Might has set, for better or for worse. All Might goes on to admit to Deku that his power was passed down to him, a power we'll be referring to by its proper name going forward, One for All. The name is one half of the phrase all for one and one for all, which comes from the Alexander Dumas classic, The Three Musketeers. The concept behind the phrase basically conveys that the group pledges to support the individual and the individual pledges to support the group. Both halves of this phrase become the backbone to many of the characters and story arcs of this series. With that context in mind, with One for All Might uses his power as an individual for the sake of everyone else, or the group, so to speak. One for All is a power that's cultivated by one person and passed to another, who cultivates it further before passing it to the next person, creating a chain of succession. The abstract imagery of All for One being passed through the generations used in the anime is so unique and beautiful and becomes a running motif throughout the series. Turns out, All Might has been looking for a successor and met Deku at the perfect time. Despite being a quirkless fanboy who really had no business throwing himself into danger, his actions were more heroic than anyone else on site, which is what won All Might over. Deku accepts the offer immediately, knowing there was no reason to deny the offer, especially after All Might was so honest with him.
Because One for All is a quirk condensing the fullest physical ability of many people into one, All Might has Deku undergo physical conditioning. As stated by All Might himself, a body that is unprepared cannot fully inherit it. According to All Might, the limbs would come off and the body would explode. Detractors of MHA say that Deku was just handed a power, arguing that he didn't earn it. But frankly, that assessment is just straight up wrong. Yes, he was chosen without really working for it, knowingly at least. But this entire episode is just the beginning. The effort required to just accept the power is astronomical, and that's even before he can learn to control it. Deku is pretty small and definitely not built like an athlete. He looks like a kid preparing to leave junior high, because he is. The entire second half of this episode is quite literally Deku working his ass off to simply earn the green light from All Might to inherit the quirk. All Might sitting on the fridge is absolutely hilarious to me though, alongside his bragging about dropping from 274 kilos to 255. Not long after this amusing sight, All Might demonstrates a fraction of his power by casually crushing that same fridge with one hand. Just imagining that kind of power on display so casually is absolutely insane, especially when you consider how sturdy most modern refrigerators are built. The pair are doing their training on a beach that has been littered with trash, and Deku has been tasked with cleaning it all up. All Might's reasoning behind this is that once upon a time, volunteer work was the essence of hero work. Cleaning up the beach would keep Deku in touch with those roots, while also training his body. It draws a distinct line between how All Might still genuinely views how hero work and community service should go hand in hand, and how most heroes have gone from community service to simply being celebrities concerned with little more than their reputations. It's a quiet indictment on how bastardized and commercialized the concept of heroism has become in so many ways once corporations and brand deals became part of the equation. All Might reminds Deku that getting into UA isn't possible without a quirk, and if he wants to complete his task of cleaning up the beach before the entrance exam, he'll have to follow a rigorous training plan. Deku doesn't hesitate to commit to it, understanding that because of his reality versus his aspirations, he'll have to work much harder than his peers. Not to mention, he'll have to keep working hard even after he gets the power promised to him. He's never had any kind of experience with a quirk, while everyone else manifested theirs by the age of 4. And here we get the obligatory training montage.
The hour's approaching to give it your best, and you've got to reach your prime. That's when you need to put yourself to the test and show us a passage of time. We're gonna need a montage. Ooh, it takes a montage.
This again contradicts the idea that Deku didn't have to work for his power. You just need to watch this montage, the way it's animated, and you can see the toll it takes on Deku with just how difficult it is for him to push through.
In class, we see Deku being made fun of by everyone over the villain attack. You know, despite him being the most heroic person there, but whatever, that's still more than you've done. With everyone clowning on Deku, the teacher included, you'd think Bakugo would take center stage as the ringleader of the circus, but for once, he stays out of it. Over the next 7 months, Deku works himself to the bone to stay on top of the plan laid out for him by All Might. However, after collapsing one day, All Might realizes Deku has been overworking himself instead of sticking to the plan that was tailored specifically to him. All Might warns that overworking will have the opposite effect of what Deku was hoping to accomplish. This is similar to the scene when Goku and Gohan are training in the hyperbolic time chamber.
Hyperbola mind chamber.
No, the hyperbolic time chamber.
Hyperglycemic crime chamber.
Okay, Goku, say it with me. Hyperbolic
Hypebonics
time chamber.
rhyme chamber.
Whatever, anyway, like I was saying, this is similar to what Goku tells Gohan while they're training during the Cell Saga, how resting is possibly more important than training because you can pull more out of yourself when your body is taken care of. Deku retorts by acknowledging that he can't just do the bare minimum because if he does, he'll never catch up to his peers. On top of that, his dream is to be the #1 hero and follow in All Might's footsteps, which is also something he cannot do if he doesn't work harder than everyone else. It causes All Might to realize just how far ahead Deku is looking when it comes to his own future. For Deku, it's not enough for him to just achieve a place in UA's hero course. Coupled with that, Deku knows Bakugo is also planning to attend UA, and he's aware of just how incredible Bakugo is despite being a total shit. So Deku knows he has to assume the others trying to get into UA are at least on par with or better than Bakugo. When the day of the entrance exam finally arrives, Deku has not only completed his task, but has even gone above and beyond by cleaning extra areas of the beach that All Might hadn't instructed him to. 10 total months of constant physical conditioning have left Deku pretty ripped compared to the beanpole he was before. The time comes for Deku to receive One for All, and he reiterates that he feels like he's cheating. But All Might responds with a rather poignant quote that I think many of us need to bear in mind.
最初から運よく授かったものと認められ譲渡されたものではその本質が違う。
Then Deku is given his grand prize, a strand of All Might's hair to eat.
Later, Deku and Bakugo arrive at the entrance exam around the same time. We hear another examinee recognize Bakugo as the one from the sludge villain attack, but again, nobody seems to remember Deku being the hero, though we'll learn in a future season that someone certainly remembered. Deku makes it known to the audience that after the incident with the sludge villain, Bakugo hasn't done anything to him in the way of bullying, as shown to us earlier when Bakugo stares out the window during the commotion. On his way into the building, Deku trips but is prevented from falling through the quick use of the quirk of a character named Uraraka, who says it would be bad luck if he tripped. She gives him friendly energy, wishes him luck, and continues on her way. Meanwhile, Deku is all... Girl. In the orientation room, the voice hero, present Mike, gives them the rundown on what the exam will consist of. The goal is to rack up points in an urban battle setting by immobilizing the foe villains roaming around, with the type of villain determining the number of points received. It's pointed out by another soon-to-be supporting cast member, Ida, that present Mike listed 3 foe villains, but 4 are listed on the handout. Mike tells them the 4th villain is worth 0 points, and while not impossible to defeat, there's no reason to engage with it. At the end of the presentation is the first time we hear the school motto.
さらに向こうへフルスウルトラ
Episode 4 opens with our first glimpse of some other pro heroes who will play significant roles in upcoming arcs like Endeavour and Best Jeanist. Deku is taken to Battle Center B, where he undergoes the exam alongside Uraraka and Ida. He attempts to thank Uraraka for helping him earlier, but is stopped by Ida, who says she looks like she's trying to focus. This is the first clue we get that while Ida initially comes off as a stern stick in the mud, he's also considerate of other people. Deku has no self-confidence, and it's clear that everyone else there looks down on him, or at the absolute least doesn't see him as a true competitor. We see that All Might shows concern that despite Deku becoming a proper vessel for One For All, that it was still a vessel made in a hurry. Not to mention, Deku didn't get to test out his newly acquired quirk before the exam. For all of the care All Might put into his training plan, he really should have budgeted enough time for Deku to at least use the power a couple of times before this incredibly important exam. It's almost as bad as King Kai not allowing travel time for Goku to go back along Snake Way and fight the Saiyans. To All Might's credit, he does at least warn Deku about the physical toll One For All is going to take on his body. It isn't long before Deku is set upon by a foe villain worth 1 point, but finds himself unable to move thanks to a good old dose of fear. Deku's hesitation allows a different character and future classmate Aoyama to snatch the point. The exam is only 10 minutes long, and Deku is already down to 6.5. His lack of initiative, confidence, and overall experience with a quirk leave him in a position where every villain he finds has already been demolished. This entrance exam once again reinforces how unbalanced this world is. The exam is mainly geared toward combat, giving those with offensive-style quirks an immediate advantage. Some students even have support items already like Aoyama's belt. As we'll see later in the sports festival arc with Shinso, can you imagine how many capable students would fall or already have fallen through the cracks simply because their quirk isn't geared towards this very specific type of hero work? It harkens back to that one quote, "Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid." This is reflected in our own world in many ways. Those with certain skills are judged to be inherently more valuable. Coming from a well-off family can grant you opportunities and connections that will take you much further. There's standardized testing systems all over the world that only cater to a certain style of learning and ability in very limited topics. And of course, how many times have people with a lot of money brushed off legal trouble thanks to a hotshot lawyer?
Getting back into the action, Deku is quickly running out of time and is scrambling to build some momentum, especially after hearing that Uraraka is already sitting on 28 points and Ida has racked up a hearty 45. We've already gotten a hint of Uraraka's kind nature, but now we get a glimpse of how effective her quirk can be. And even though Ida has most certainly been established as a spoil sport, he's absolutely capable of holding his own. The number of villains is decreasing fast, and Deku is still trailing behind everyone with a big ol' goose egg. The teachers watching the exam released the 0-point villain, the massive machine acting as an overwhelming threat to be avoided. When Villain 0 is released, it's a stark contrast to how we've seen crowds behave during a crisis before. When the idea that a hero will inevitably show up and save the day is there, the crowd oohs and ahs over the spectacle. But when they have to be the heroes, and at the same time, we hear the teachers say that this kind of threat shows who someone truly is. With 2 minutes left on the clock and Villain 0 pursuing the examinees, Deku is still trying to figure out how he'll scramble together some points while he retreats. However, he realizes that Uraraka is trapped by debris in the path of the approaching machine. Admittedly, Uraraka could almost certainly have rescued herself here, but whatever. Remembering the kindness she showed him and instinctively running in to assist her the same way he did Bakugo, Deku activates One For All and launches himself at Villain 0, delivering a devastating blow that sends it toppling. Unfortunately, those pesky physical ramifications hinted at earlier rear their heads, and it's revealed that the explosive power he channeled broke both of his legs and the arm he used to attack. Deku realizes he was too conceited in his perspective, now understanding that all his training and All Might's power afforded him was the right to stand at the same starting line as everyone else. he still had a long way to go to make up for the years worth of experience and intimate knowledge the other students had with their own quirks. While falling from the sky, Deku is still considering his grand total of 0 points. You know, it might be better to prioritize your imminent date with the ground instead, buddy. Falling out of the sky, Deku is rescued at the last moment by Ochiko's quirk. It's a clever payoff from showing her saving him from tripping in the first place, setting up a solution to him falling to his potential death that makes sense. We also get to see the first hint of a quirk having side effects when Ochako starts vomiting rainbows. Deku's first concern when landing is Ochako. The other students chatter about the nature of Deku's quirk and the fact he still ended up with no points. It's only Ida that views the situation differently, appearing to have noticed the reason why Deku attacked Villain Zero in the first place. Ida ponders on the fact that Deku, aware of his situation, the time limit, and the points he needed to pass, still didn't hesitate to save Ochako instead. Ida then expresses irritation, thinking to himself that he'd of course have done the same thing in that situation were it not an exam. This line of thought is more to convince himself that when the time came he'd naturally behave like a hero the way Deku had, but because this was an exam, his self-serving actions don't or shouldn't count. However, he catches himself questioning his choice of wording. Before he can unpack his knee-jerk response, he's brought out of his thoughts by the school nurse, Recovery Girl. Ida's declaration that of course he'd always prioritize rescue over all else will most definitely come back to bite him later in the story, but we'll get to that in another video. Recovery Girl's insane ability to heal others is what allows UA to utilize such a treacherous entrance exam without the fear of any true or long-lasting harm befalling these children. A week later, Deku is in a daze, knowing through tallying his own score that he barely passed the written exam, but he's still shell-shocked by his complete and utter failure to accrue any points in the practical exam, so he feels whatever progress he made was cancelled out entirely. On top of that, he hasn't been able to contact All Might since the exam ended, which is also feeding into his anxiety and the sense he'd fumbled the bag hard. While lost in thought, the results of the exam arrive. A projection of All Might explains that Deku may have passed the written exam but didn't get any points during the practical exam, so of course that means he didn't pass. But then there's a long ass pause to allow Deku to wallow in his failure before All Might continues on to say him failing would be the case if the only thing that mattered was points. I've never understood the inclusion of dramatic pauses and pre-recorded messages in works of fiction. It's only ever there to give a character a moment to feel bad or concerned before the very obvious "but wait, there's more" moment happens. Deku is shown a video of Ochako after the exam, attempting to share some of her points with him as her own way of showing her gratitude for Deku rescuing her, even at the cost of any points he could have potentially gathered by simply leaving her behind. Ochako probably did this knowing that giving away some of her points might jeopardize her own chances of getting into UA. This act showed that Deku truly embodied an important aspect of being a hero, the spirit of self-sacrifice. This is enough to grant Deku a passing grade and entrance into UA. After all, as All Might says, how can a hero course reject people who save others and do the right thing? On top of the points gained by defeating the villains, rescue points were also possible to obtain from a panel of judges. And though he gathered no hero points, in the end he walked away with 60 rescue points. Ultimately, saving people is what being a hero is about. The exam looks like it's just about fighting villains, but it's that way by design. The examiners want to see who these kids are, and not just in their fighting prowess. Deku's struggles and his efforts are answered in kind, and he's earned the right to stand at the same starting line as everyone else.
When the next episode begins, we see that Deku and Bakugo have similar but mirrored scores, where Deku had 0 hero points but 60 rescue points, and Bakugo had 77 hero points but no rescue points. It's a nice visual representation of not just the difference in their current skills and capabilities, but also their difference in mindset. A discussion with All Might leads to him telling Deku that he just happened to be offered a teaching position at UA while he was searching for a successor. So Deku's thought is that All Might had originally been planning to choose one of the students from UA, which we find out way later that there was in fact a prime candidate. After all, what better place to find a successor than at a school with a reputation for producing top-tier heroes? All Might explains to Deku that right now with One For All, he's either at 0 or at 100%, but the more he trains, the sooner he'll be able to learn to adjust the power to suit his body without injury. Pivoting our focus to the school in question, the acceptance rate for UA is less than 1 in 300 every year. Including the 4 students that get into the school based on recommendations alone, only 36 students are admitted through the formal exam process that Deku and the others were subjected to. Those students are then split into 2 classes, 1A and 1B. Deku was slotted into 1A, and with very few exceptions, we will almost never concern ourselves with Class 1B. Naturally, the top performers of the exam were placed in 1A, so Bakugo, Uraraka and Ida are all there. However, of the 4 students who made it in on recommendations, only 2 were placed in 1A. I think now is as good a time as any to go over the roster of Class 1A. Even if we don't spend a ton of time talking about the individuals over the course of Season 1's narrative, it's still helpful to know who these people are for later. Tenya Ida, Quirk, Engine. He has engines in his legs that give him super speed and remarkable leg strength as we saw in the exam. Katsuki Bakugo, Quirk, Explosion. He can secrete sweat akin to nitroglycerin from the glands of his palms and cause them to ignite on command.
Momo Yaoyorizu, Quirk, Creation. She can create any non-organic material with the lipids in her body, but only when she understands the molecular structure of said item. Momo is one of the 4 students who got into UA on recommendation. Ochako Uraraka, Quirk, Zero Gravity. She can nullify the effects of gravity from anything she touches, but overuse makes her physically sick.
Shoto Todoroki, Quirk, half cold, half hot. Despite how ridiculous his quirk name sounds, it's very accurate. He can produce intense flames with one half of his body and powerful ice with the other. He's the other student in Class 1A that made it into UA on recommendation. Yuga Aoyama, Quirk, Navel Laser. He shoots a laser from his belly button, but it causes serious stomach cramps. He wears a support belt to mitigate this.
Mina Ashido, Quirk, Acid. She secretes a corrosive liquid from her body while controlling both its viscosity and solubility. Suyu Asui, Quirk,
I'm a frog.
Pretty self-explanatory. She can basically do whatever a frog can, such as climbing any wall, jumping, swimming, regurgitating her stomach, secreting a toxic mucus, and of course, the long tongue. She also likes to be called Sue.
Mashiro Ojiro, Quirk, Tail. Again, pretty self-explanatory. He has a tail that he can manipulate like a limb and excels at close combat. Denki Kaminari, Quirk, Electrification. He's essentially an electric type with a penchant for Thundershock. It's super effective. Overuse of his quirk temporarily fries his brain though.
Speaking of Pokemon, Eijiro Kirishima, Quirk, Hardening. It sounds like a wannabe Metapod move, but it's actually a pretty cool power. He can turn his body rock hard, which is useful for offensive and defensive purposes. Kirishima is also a happy little dinosaur boy who must be protected at all costs. In the dub, he's voiced by Yusuke Urameshi himself, Justin Cook, who also voices characters like Raditz, Super Boo, Hatsuharu Soma, Eustace Kid, Pooh, and the Cell Juniors. Koji Koda, Quirk, Anavoice. He has the ability to talk to animals and insects, making them follow his every whim. Ironically though, Koda almost never speaks.
Rikido Sato, Quirk, Sugar Rush. For every 10 grams of sugar he ingests, his strength increases 5-fold for 3 minutes, but it also causes hypoglycemia, which affects his cognitive function. Meizo Shoji, Quirk, Dupla Arms. He has arm-like tentacles next to his standard arms that can transform into duplicates of other body parts, such as eyes and ears. These duplicates are much more powerful than the originals.
Kyokajiro, Quirk, Earphone Jack. She has auxiliary cords on her earlobes that can hear the smallest sound. She can also plug her jacks into the speakers on her boots and amplify her heartbeat as a devastating weapon. This quirk is actually what started everything. It's the first one Horikoshi thought of while traveling on a bus one day, and the rest is history. Hantasero, Quirk, Tape. He shoots tape from his elbows. Horikoshi has gone on record that this is his favorite quirk in the series, and it's little wonder considering he's a massive Spider-Man fanboy.
Fumikage Tokoyami, Quirk, Dark Shadow. He controls a shadow-like monster from his body at will. It's more powerful in darkness but that much more volatile. When exposed to light, it's easier to control but far weaker. Toru Hagakure, Quirk, Invisibility. She's invisible. Okay, forget Mineta. How in the hell did she pass the entrance exam? Last and most certainly least, Minoru Mineta, Quirk, Pop-Off. He has sticky balls for hair that stick to everything except him. Admittedly can be quite versatile, but this doesn't change the fact that Mineta is the worst.
While Deku is getting acquainted with Ida and Ochako, Bakugo is quietly stewing on the fact Deku even made it into UA at all. We get a small flashback of Bakugo raging at Deku, assuming he pulled some dirty trick to get into the hero course, but also because Deku's mere presence completely undermines his own personal but selfish goals. Bakugo is convinced that Deku faked being quirkless all this time. He's so blinded by rage that he never stops to consider how absurd that is. For one, what reason would Deku have to hide anything? A power like that would have stopped everyone from bullying him, and it would have shut down any any notion that he couldn't be a hero. Deku stands up to Bakugo even though he's clearly scared of him, saying he made it in through his own effort. That defiance only further burns Bakugo to his core, but also has him feeling there's more going on. However, this is the first time we see Deku push past his fear and actually push back against Bakugo, standing his ground. Bakugo even says, "How dare he defy me?" Like, again, the balls on this kid. Not long after, Aizawa shows up to commence his role as their homeroom teacher. He looks like he's in desperate need of a bath and a good night's sleep. We can even throw in a juice box for good measure. Either way, it's certainly a memorable entrance, sleeping bag and all, which we will definitely see again. Aizawa makes them change into their activewear and sends them out to the field for a quirk assessment test. He has them throw a softball as far as they can with the assistance of their quirks. The point of the exercise is to determine one's own maximum so that they can begin building on top of that. It's a simple but important concept. How can you surpass your limits if you aren't even aware of what they are?
After some flippant comments from the students, Aizawa basically hits them with a "make sure you keep that energy" trap card, saying that whoever comes in last in his series of tests will be judged as unfit and ejected from the hero course. When Uraraka comments that a punishment like expulsion is unfair, Aizawa rightly retorts that between natural disasters, massive accidents, and the belligerence of villains, Japan has more than enough unfairness to go around. But it's the job of a hero to reverse those unfair circumstances. Aizawa is trying to teach them an important lesson in perseverance in the face of unfairness. Through these tests, Aizawa is forcing the kids to identify the upper limits of their quirks, as well as the room for growth in each of the results. Doing so, according to him, will connect the student to the creativity they'll need to grow, adapt, and survive the harshness of the 3-year hero course. Aizawa is also the first person in the series to come out and say point blank that this world is not equal, and how counterproductive it is to not let the most talented shine. Harsh as it is, you can definitely see the logic behind his words, especially in a world dictated by the push and pull of superpowered beings. As we come to see, Aizawa is most definitely a fan of rational thinking. We get another small flashback, this time to All Might trying to help Deku come up with a way to imagine his power usage so as not to injure himself again. They land on the idea of cooking an egg in the microwave, and All Might tells him to focus on the image of cooking the egg without the egg exploding. This will not be the last food-related imagery that Deku uses. Realising he's running out of events to claim a slot higher than last place, and not wanting a repeat of his lackluster performance in the exam, Deku goes to throw the softball with 100% power in a desperate bid to change his situation. Seeing what Deku is about to do, Aizawa uses his own quirk to intervene. You see, no pun intended, Aizawa's quirk allows him to temporarily erase the quirk of the person or people he's looking at, though there are limits to this, as we'll see later.
Aizawa picks up on the fact that Deku can't control his quirk and scolds him, asking if he intends to end up incapacitated and needing to be bailed out in the same fashion as the entrance exam. He goes on to say that in the state Deku is in currently, his quirk would only become a burden to those around him, who would be forced to not only rescue him, but subsequently pick up his slack too. The teacher goes on to specifically point out that Deku's noble intentions are essentially useless if his body can't keep up. He's already written Deku off, which, let's be honest, almost anyone would do, and in fact, most people already have. We've seen it with Bakugo, his junior high class, Ida, and even the other participants during the entrance exam. Unlike someone such as All Might who could save large quantities of people on his own, Deku would be out of commission after just helping one person. As such, Aizawa tells Deku that with his quirk, he cannot become a hero before giving him one more chance with the softball throw. But unlike Bakugo, Deku isn't one to become defensive and hostile toward criticism or correction, and we're about to see it. Hearing and internalizing the truth in Aizawa's words, Deku course corrects to the best of his ability and channels One for All into just his index finger, using it to launch the softball into the sky. He still breaks his finger in the process, but minimizing the injury to himself so that he can keep moving forward is all he can do for now. In the end, Deku actually exceeds Bakugo's impressive score by just a fraction. Deku's classmates are a mixture of relieved and impressed by his display, but Bakugo is completely speechless, though not in a good way. Our train makes another stop in Flashback City, and we see Deku and Bakugo as toddlers, where Deku is complimenting Bakugo's quirk while hoping his own manifests soon. Bakugo tells him that no matter what quirk Deku does come into possession of, he'll never beat him. From the way Bakugo carries himself, even at that early age, it's beyond obvious that he's loving the admiration and sense of superiority.
The transition back to the present day is a clear sign that the superiority Bakugo has always felt he held over Deku is splintering in ways he never thought he'd have to contend with. And ultimately, he can't handle it. He can't handle the idea that he's not number one or that he could ever be wrong about anything, but especially about Deku. There's also the recurring line of Bakugo comparing Deku to a pebble on the side of the road. But now he's being faced with the idea that Deku may in fact become something far worse, an active roadblock in his path. Despite his best efforts, Deku still manages to come in last place once the scores for the various rounds of the fitness test were all tallied up. However, Aizawa reveals that he was lying about the expulsion. It was a tactical move to force the students to draw out the upper limits of their quirks. When leaving the students to their own devices, Aizawa is confronted by All Might, who's been watching from a distance. All Might calls him out for lying about the expulsion, since according to All Might, Aizawa had punished an entire class of first years with expulsion during the previous school year. He concluded that Aizawa must have felt Deku's potential if it caused him to go back on his word. It's a decent way of showing that Deku's potential is something being recognised through his sheer determination, even though he's so far behind his peers in pretty much every regard. Even after everything we've seen Deku go through just to get into UA, he's still starting from the bottom. Deku ends up making fast friends with Ida once he realises he's not exactly a stick in the mud, he's just earnest. Uraraka joins the boys on the way to the station, forming the main trio, at least for now. It's really important to state right away that Deku is first and foremost the main character. The characters in his direct orbit will cycle in and out based on whatever's happening in the story. So while characters like Ida and Uraraka remain important to Deku as the story goes on, they'll float in and out of the narrative with the same frequency as any other side character after a certain point. Since we need to care about Deku and want to follow his journey, naturally he's going to get the most attention, especially in the first season. We get enough from characters like Uraraka, Ida, and even Kirishima to generate an idea of who they are, but Deku is the primary focus. This can turn some people away from the series, and while it's definitely a slightly questionable choice from a storytelling point of view, those who can see past it for now will definitely be rewarded for their patience. Deku makes it known that such is not his actual name, and just something Bakugo calls him to insult him to his face, calling him useless. Uraraka comments that it's close to how it sounds to the Japanese word for "you can do it," and in the dub, she even says it would make a great hero name, wink wink.
All Might makes his first appearance to the students as a teacher and gets them prepared for combat training while also giving them the costumes you'll see them in for the foreseeable future, all of which were designed based on their quirk registrations and requests sent in before the school year started. Deku's suit is mostly comprised of a jumpsuit made by his mother as her way of apologizing for giving up on his dream while he continued to chase it. Many of the hero designs are incredibly creative and memorable. In the manga volumes, Horikoshi has given extra information about the functions and purposes of various costumes. For example, Mineta's gloves are made from a sample of his scalp so that the balls don't stick to them. Kirishima upgrades his costume to have sleeves so that he doesn't accidentally injure anybody he might have to carry out of danger because he's such a cinnamon roll. Ochako has certain pressure points activated to combat the nausea she feels, and so on. For the current exercise, the class is being split into two groups of heroes and villains for 2-on-2 indoor battles. The long and short of it is the students playing the heroes must track down and dispose of a nuclear weapon in the possession of the villains, whose objective is to protect said weapon. The heroes are up against the clock and within the designated time must either secure the villains or retrieve the weapon in order to win. The villains win if time runs out or if they manage to subdue the heroes. Deku ends up on a team with Ochako and they're pitted against Bakugo and Ida. Bakugo's rage only increases as he once again considers the possibility that Deku tricked him into believing he was quirkless. While outside going over the building's floor plan, Deku makes his feelings about Bakugo known to Ochako. He freely admits that regardless of Bakugo's character, he's actually pretty amazing in terms of the traits that can make him a top hero. Even more so when measured against Deku. It's even hard for the audience to deny Bakugo's talent at this point, despite his obvious faults on full display. However, it's that recognition of Bakugo's honest superiority that fuels Deku's desire to emerge from the exercise triumphant. Deku understands he's in a less than ideal situation since there's no way he can plausibly strike someone with one for all. Without being able to control the power output, he knows it would straight up kill someone. In that vein, he decides to rely on Ochako's zero gravity to win. I like how this shows the faith he's prepared to put in Ochako and how much he already respects her.
Once the combat exercise begins, Bakugo wastes no time hunting them down and goes right into attack. Even though Deku pulls Uraraka out of the way, Bakugo's attack is still powerful enough to delete half of Deku's mask. Deku shrugs it off as just a scratch, and that comment has me trying to fight off Monty Python flashbacks like I'm a sleeper cell agent.
'Tis but a scratch. A scratch?
Bakugo states outright that he doesn't plan to do so much damage to Deku that the battle gets stopped, but he does intend to get close, which is a horrifying threat for a hero in training to levy against another student. Not to mention the ballsiness it takes to say that, knowing that the entire class and his idol All Might are watching. Unfortunately for Bakugo, after going in for another attack, he's caught by surprise when Deku interrupts him and flips him over his shoulder, slamming Bakugo to the floor. Deku shows more of his analytical character trait by revealing that he knew Bakugo was going to open with a big right swing, commenting on just how much he's watched Bakugo over the years. It's a neat detail to learn that Deku wrote an analysis for all the heroes he thought were amazing in his notebook, alluding to the idea that not only does he have a detailed analysis of Bakugo, but that he has always recognized Bakugo as an exceptional individual. Deku goes on to stand up for himself in this moment by declaring that Deku isn't always going to mean useless. This serves to deepen his friendship with Uraraka as well, showing her that her words of affirmation have influenced him in a tangibly positive way. For Bakugo though, witnessing Deku stand up to him regardless of the fear that gripped him, just like when they were small children, only deepens his rage.
Deku and Bakugo lived in the same neighborhood, so they basically grew up together. Bakugo was a confident boy who could do whatever he put his mind to and led a group of neighborhood kids. Being somewhat reserved, Deku looked up to him. After Bakugo's quirk manifested, his confidence accelerated down the wrong path. In a way, Bakugo has always been a natural leader, or maybe everyone just wanted to be around him for his status in the aftermath of the praise his quirk caused people to heap on him. Perhaps they followed him to guarantee they wouldn't be the target of his wrath or ridicule. It's ironic since Bakugo naturally draws people to him, but he's determined to be a complete individual. He strongly dislikes working with others or being lumped into a group. Bakugo wants to stand at the top of the mountain on his own without equal. I also love how even though All Might isn't spelling out the unfairness of life as bluntly as Aizawa did, he does acknowledge it. He's put the students in a situation where the heroes are at a disadvantage, which will certainly happen when they go pro. Heroes should be able to turn the tables on whatever predicament they're in. Even though it's just class, he's already teaching them the very real and imbalanced kinds of situations they'll inevitably face. Deku continues to demonstrate that all of his time analyzing heroes, including Bakugo, was not in vain. This allows Deku to get away from his adversary while also making him cautious. Deku can tell by Bakugo's actions that the enemy team isn't working together, since it would have been better to send in Ida as the advanced guard thanks to his mobility.
Shifting lanes again, because Bakugo just happened to be good at things naturally, he couldn't figure out why others couldn't do the same things. When his quirk manifested, he came to the conclusion that the reason he was so ahead of others was because he was amazing and no one else was as amazing as him. Naturally, this belief and a lack of conflicting perspective solidified his complex. Though it's important to note that Bakugo's ego isn't entirely his own fault. We've seen multiple times now that he's told again and again that he was and is exceptional, a cut above the rest. This began the moment his quirk came into being, and it's only increased as he's become a teenager. It makes sense that his mentality would be reinforced by his peers and most adults almost to the point of no return. After Deku was diagnosed as quirkless, Bakugo immediately deemed him as the least amazing person, serving as a visual representation for all to see of everything Bakugo was not and solidifying this mental image he would always have of Deku. While they're out playing, Bakugo falls from the path into a small creek below. Even though he's perfectly fine and the other kids don't even consider going down to check on him, Deku does and extends a hand to help. Coming from someone he personally deemed as inferior in every conceivable way, Bakugo took it as a deeply personal insult that Deku had the audacity to assume he needed the quirkless boy's help. This infuriated Bakugo in a way that forever changed his position on Deku from neutral condescension to openly and consistently hostile. It's really sad that Bakugo has such a fixed mindset that Deku was in any way trying to be condescending or judgmental. It's obvious that Deku was genuinely worried about the safety of his friend and playmate, but Bakugo was determined to misinterpret it. This is a consistent trait shown by Bakugo throughout the series, that obsession with never allowing anyone to work with him or help him in any way. He wants to ride solo.
Ochako eventually finds the target but blows the element of surprise by laughing at Ida's attempts to get into his role as a villain. This is also the first hint we get of Ida's family being a factor in his personality and drive. He mentions not bringing shame to the Ida family, and this will of course be important later. Ida knew once Bakugo ran off that Ochako would arrive alone, so he put away all the objects on the floor that she could manipulate with her quirk, rendering her mostly useless against him. Thanks to Ochako, Deku realizes she's in the middle of the 5th floor, which is basically directly above him. Bakugo finds him and asks why he won't use his quirk, questioning if Deku is underestimating him by assuming he can win without it. The gaudy-ass grenade gauntlets he wears store that sweat inside them, which he can then release in the form of a destructive burst. The more that's stored up, the stronger the blast becomes. The reason Bakugo wants Deku to use his quirk so badly is so that he can force him to surrender even while he's at full strength, thus cementing Bakugo's superiority over Deku and putting him in his place. Upstairs, Ochako attempts to get to the target while Ida is distracted by the explosion by causing herself to float, but Ida moves it before she can lay a finger on it, preventing a victory. All Might prevents Bakugo from using his other gauntlet by telling him that doing so will get his team disqualified. According to All Might, using such a destructive attack in such a confined space is inviting destruction on the stronghold he should be protecting, which is stupid for heroes and villains to do. Another fight kicks off and Deku tries to read Bakugo, but Bakugo begins shifting his tactics to get the upper hand. Deku starts getting his ass beat since Bakugo isn't giving him time to think. In a way, this shows that Bakugo has already deduced that Deku's mind is the biggest threat to him. Even the students watching the exhibition recognize Bakugo's frightening natural talent as well as his brutality. All Might should stop the battle as a responsible teacher, but he doesn't want to for Deku's sake. It's clear Deku is still giving it his all, and stopping things because he's currently losing a fight would spit in the face of Deku's efforts without giving him a chance to turn the tables the way All Might and Aizawa say a hero should be able to. Deku appears to run away, but stops by a nearby window where he admits to Bakugo what he told Ochako before the match, that he wants to beat him because he thinks Bakugo is amazing. He wants to surpass him even. But Bakugo accuses Deku of deliberately underestimating him. To Bakugo, this is up there with the worst kind of insult. Recognizing that he can't beat Bakugo in a one-on-one yet, Deku puts his plan into motion with Ochako. Before the clash with Bakugo, he switches his Detroit Smash from a hook to an uppercut at the last moment, blasting through the ceiling with a shockwave that allows Ochako on the floors above to finally capture the target. By meeting Bakugo on his level and tanking his attack head on, he effectively prevented Bakugo from realizing what it was he was up to until it was too late and Deku's team had won.
Following his loss to Deku, Bakugo is having a whole-ass meltdown. He realizes that Deku predicted his right and still found a way to secure victory for his team. This makes Bakugo ponder the idea that if the two went all out against each other, that Deku would completely defeat him. All Might, who can see Bakugo is ready to go off like one of those TNT boxes in Crash Bandicoot, steps in to remind him that learning from your losses and experiences is a part of life. Ida is named MVP of the match because he was the one that most adapted to the scenario, prepared for certain outcomes, and also took no damage. This is all explained by Momo, who is introduced as one of the students that got in on recommendations. She, like most characters, quickly falls into irrelevance. However, like most characters, she will have her moments to shine. The second match is Shoji and Todoroki versus Ojiro and Hagakure. Todoroki demonstrates why he made it into the school on recommendation alone and totally not through nepotism when he single-handedly overwhelms the opposing team to secure victory. I'm so glad that the fandom collectively decided to forget that Todoroki's Iceman Terminator getup ever happened. Apparently so did the series, since this is the only time we ever see it. Everyone in the class is understandably in awe of Todoroki's power, but that one close-up of Bakugo reveals that he's the only one not impressed. He's absolutely rocked to the core. This is the second time his mask has slipped, but in a different way than it did against the slime villain. He's not afraid for himself. He's afraid of this tangible proof that he's not the strongest in Class A. Coming right after his loss to Deku, who he already ranks below reject level, the power imbalance is hitting even harder. The other matches do not matter at all. They're literally not even shown except for a few seconds where certain quirks flash by. It does suck though, because this really could have been a great introduction to the other students of Class 1A. All Might leaves the class behind because his transformation timer is running out. We find out that All Might's secret is common knowledge among the UA teachers and a handful of pro heroes, but the knowledge of One for All is known only by a select few, including Recovery Girl, the school principal, one of All Might's close friends who we won't talk about at all in this video, and Deku. Recovery Girl asks if it's so important for All Might to be perceived as the symbol of peace, and he responds that if he's not, the superhero world will be thrown into chaos, and that's genuinely no hyperbole. Most crime is deterred because of the mere existence of All Might. If it comes to light that he's out of play, crime will skyrocket. We'll see and explore in a future video just how fragile the image of All Might is and how dependent the world is on it. The smallest crack has devastating consequences. Recovery Girl shoots back that with his logic, it's even more important for All Might to learn how to properly guide Deku instead of allowing him to get hurt so frequently.
When Deku returns to class, the other students show their enthusiasm for what he accomplished and how it got them fired up to do their best during those training matches we didn't get to see. However, I'm very glad to see best boy Kirishima take the lead on this. The whole interaction just cements the little we've already seen of him, his strong sense of justice, and how manly is his word of the day. Deku notices Bakugo isn't present, and Ochako tells him that Bakugo went home despite them trying to stop him. When Deku does catch up to Bakugo, he spills the beans that his quirk was given to him and he can't control it yet. He stops short of saying who he got it from, but he still definitely said too much. Bakugo, naturally, thinks Deku is trying to make more of a fool out of him than he feels Deku already has. But we see that his loss to Deku also caused him to doubt his ability further after seeing how effortlessly powerful and efficient Todoroki was. Bakugo found himself thinking that if it came down to it, he couldn't beat Todoroki, and after Momo pointed out Bakugo's mistake by expressing that it was foolish to launch a large-scale attack indoors, he admits that he found himself agreeing with her. We see a real vulnerability to Bakugo in this scene because for once, his anger stems from a place of uncertainty and defeat. He's frustrated with himself, having been beaten so thoroughly by someone he's always perceived to be weaker, seeing appear in action that he understood he couldn't win against, and then agreeing with someone that was pointing out his mistakes. For the first time ever, Bakugo was forced to take a hard look at himself and see that not only was there room for improvement, but that there were kids his age that were actively better than him. And this reality where these feelings exist only came into focus because he lost to someone he never thought it possible to. But what I love about this scene is how those genuine frustrations turn to tears. He's angry and humiliated, but that forms the foundation of his resolve as he declares he's going to become number one at the school and that Deku won't beat him again. He's not making excuses or running from the reality of it. He acknowledges that he's lost and vows to work hard so that it doesn't happen again. Just how Deku had to struggle to break through physical barriers to stand at his starting line, this emotional breakthrough was Bakugo's. This was one of the first moments that genuinely made me sit up and take notice of Bakugo as more than just a loudmouth, aggressive foil to our protagonist. It really takes everything we know about him so far and shows us that he's a legitimately complex character. Even though this isn't the first time the song plays, this was the first time I truly noticed the use of the iconic musical track, also titled My Hero Academia. It puts a beautiful bow on everything this scene stood for and made you feel.
In an after-credits scene, we get our first look at the main antagonist, Shigaraki. In the English dub, he's voiced by Eric Vale, better known as Future Trunks in Dragon Ball Z, Sanji in One Piece, and even Rando and Sakio in Yu Yu Hakusho. Whichever version you watch, his design and demeanour immediately gives you chills, and it makes you wonder what angle his interaction with the story is going to take.